Several years ago, I exited a serious relationship. This was someone who I cared deeply about. Um, this was someone who, on the third date, I asked her to marry me. And we had a plan. We talked about the future. Um, and the relationship lasted for a little over a year. And then it ended. And after this serious relationship with this person who, at the time, I planned to spend the rest of my life with didn't work out, I had to do some serious reflection, and I really wanted to. I felt like maybe I made some mistake. I need to do better in some way, you know? And so what I did was I went through an intense period of self reflection where at times um, I refused to go out, like on a Friday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I would make myself stay in because I didn't want myself, I didn't want my mind avoiding certain thoughts. I wanted to confront them head on. Um, I refused to watch the news. I refused to watch YouTube. I refused to be on social media. And again, some of those nights I would just stay in and I would sit on the couch, no TV, nothing, and I would just sit there because I wanted to be okay just being by myself with my thoughts. A philosopher wrote, Blaise Pascal, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. I didn't know that this quote existed at the time, but it makes perfect sense. And in a more recent relationship that I exited, uh, this is a tactic that I found to be useful in just processing the past so that as I moved forward, I was and am in control of my mind and my thoughts. But it's always a struggle. And it's probably a struggle for you if you're watching this. How do I know? Well, if you're a human alive today, it's a temptation and a risk for everyone in terms of who is in control of your mind, who owns your mind. Because this will determine the rest of your life. We live in the most connected age in history ever. And ironically, more people today, at an increasing rate, are lonely, isolated. Suicide risks are on the rise, suicide rates, I should say. And we are also highly stimulated, even though much of that stimulation comes from so called social ways. Whether it's us going out in person to a bar, to a party, to some sort of event, or us engaging online socially, or texting online, um, WhatsApp, Instagram, mobile apps, or just regular SMS texting. This is what I call stimming. We're always stimming ourselves, short for stimulating ourselves. And it's really just a form of escape. It's a self-induced drug. It's a self-induced coma, um, in which we give up our minds to various apps and brands and situations. We give up our minds by diverting our attention away from our own conscious thoughts. And again, this begs the question for you, who owns your mind? Is it YouTube? Is it Meta slash Facebook slash Instagram slash some other social media platform? Is it some news channel? Is it X? Is it your phone in terms of texting? Is it some dating app? Who owns your mind? And if you could be in control of your mind, though, what would you do with your time? That would be different from now. Perhaps more importantly, what thoughts are you avoiding when you give up this control of your mind. Because why do we do it? Why do we do it in the first place? Sometimes we give it up in different ways other than through digital or social stimulation. We give it up to, and this is probably the worst, to alcohol or drugs. Why do we do it? Because it feels fun. It's some sort of a short-term high. We feel uninhibited. We think we're having fun, but the price and the bill always comes due the next day in the form of a hangover, or worse, we want to drink or we want to do drugs again. Or we want to go back to our dating apps, to our news sources, to our news feeds. What thoughts are you avoiding? Can you actually sit down for an hour and be okay just staring at the window, or even, in some ways better, staring at a wall? I've found that putting myself in low stim situations is actually really helpful, especially for work. I think meditation is very helpful too. So what do I mean by low stim situations? Like basically where you don't have some external source of stimulation and engagement that is taking your attention away from yourself, away from your present moment, from where you are physically now, from the awareness that you are here, you are alive, and you want to do something right now. If only you could reclaim your thoughts, you would be able to get back to that question, which we talked about in the previous video, of what do you want? What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? It's a question you should be asking again and again and again. So low stim activities can mean just, when you go out, even to the gym, go out for a walk, don't listen to podcasts. Don't listen to music. And you might, that might be hard, but just do it a couple of times. See how you start to feel. In Buddhism, there's the concept of the mind, the body, and the subtle body, which is something in between. It's a feeling of, you can sort of imagine as the subtle body is what you feel when you might be always late to something, or you're just kind of rushing around. It's what monks have described as being just out of balance, out of calibration in the West, where they move their hand like this when they describe it. It's almost like a fluttering in the body, in the heart, where you feel, like I wrote this song lyric recently. The song lyric is, travel around to escape your mind, always arriving but never on time. And always arriving but never on time. That is what it feels like when the subtle body is just out of calibration. When it's always about the next thing. It's always about, like, how can you stimulate yourself next? Another way you could be stimulating yourself too is food. Pretty much anything that you get some dopamine stimulation from. So part of what works, I found, is meditation, walking, running, going to the gym without music or podcasts or videos or anything. Turn off the TV, just sitting down quietly alone in the room with just you and your thoughts. Journaling, as I mentioned in the previous video, is also extremely helpful. Journaling is one of the most active and engaging ways to instantly reclaim your mind. When you first sit down to do it, if you haven't done it for a while, you're going to find that you have to dump out a lot of garbage first. A lot of feelings, a lot of maybe thoughts about the past, maybe just from the last day or week or whatever. You got to kind of process it, dump it out, externalize it, and then you can get back to, okay, the cup is empty in the best way possible. Now I'm able to start to fill it with the answer to the question of what do I want? So write it out, walk it out, sit it out, but think constantly about who owns your mind and what is it holding you back from? What thoughts, what perhaps difficult, uncomfortable thoughts that might make you feel alone or sad or depressed? What is it holding you back from? I'm not saying don't be social and don't have relationships with other fellow humans. You should. It's one of the most meaningful things that you can have in life are good, solid relationships with people of substance and quality and who are loyal. Most people will just have friendships and relationships that are not those things. In a way, I also see this as a form of stimming. It's a cheap form of stimming too. You know, there are some people, maybe some of your friends, you might see them around, you might know someone might come to mind. Maybe it's even you. You have to ask yourself honestly, is it you? But some people, if it's not digital stimming or drugs or alcohol or you know, something else, it could be people, always wanting people around. And I can tell you, I've been guilty of pretty much all of these things at one time or another. Um, but you can use people as a form to stim yourself as well, to avoid, to just get that dopamine release, that constant engagement, the constant attention to take your mind away from time that could be spent more substantively, just looking inside. You know, if you go on YouTube, and I'm not saying go on YouTube because that's part of what we're talking about not doing, but in the past, I've searched YouTube for you, so you don't have to if you don't want to. And I found old videos of people who were interviewed in 1940s and 50s and even into the 60s. And it's interesting to see the difference in how people communicate. I believe communication and studying how people communicate in terms of word choice, structure, effectiveness overall in terms of what ideas they're trying to effectively relay to another person, um, cadence, tone, body language, um, and everything subtle in between that goes with it. I find this to be a good indicator as it relates to just overall um, competency, aptitude, and I believe there are ways to correlate this with intelligence as well. You can tell a lot about a person just from sampling how they communicate. And it's fascinating to see if you were to just sample people from back then and listen to how they communicated compared to people just within the last, even before the pandemic, um, how we communicate. And it's not really necessarily native to one generation, but there are differences for sure. But again, I believe a big part of the level of competence in terms of communication, and again, I believe it probably translates to intelligence to a degree too. And I say that too in an optimistic way. Something I can talk about another day if you're interested is um, I believe that intelligence is highly fluid, at least to a degree of I would say 10 points or so. I believe that we have a large control over our intelligence um, because I think people today, the way that they communicate, and you can hear it in yourself and even in your friends too. Again, I'm not innocent of any of these things by any means. Um, we can just dumb ourselves down in order to stimulate ourselves, to entertain ourselves, to entertain others, um, and it can be just infectious. Though it can become part of who we are, can become part of our identity, become part of how we think. Um, you know, in these videos, I sometimes will curse, and that's intentional to convey emotion or to maybe highlight a certain point. Um, but it's sort of like if you were someone who curses a lot or maybe speaks in a lot of slang, I think it tends to limit even just how you think in your own mind. Because you might start saying fuck this, fuck that, blah 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 in your own mind. Um, so it all just comes back to this question of who owns your mind and what are the positive benefits that you get when you reclaim it. One of them can be simply you learn to be okay with yourself. You're able to process those painful worries, past memories. You're able to get down to the bottom of the cup so that you can start refilling it again with the answer to the question of what do you want? And from there, you can begin to make choices to make your life better. So I'll end with this. As I said in the previous video, I recommend you get a journal, but you can also do the other approaches I mentioned, like walking, just sitting quietly. But I'll end with this. Life is not kind, and people will not always treat you well, but accept the discomfort in whatever the circumstances that come at you in life. And one of those profound discomforts that can come is just the passive discomfort. And for some, even the horror of looking inside quietly, alone, at your own mind. What I say to you, go through the wall. Go through the wall, and I'll see you on the other side, and I'll see you in the next video. If you enjoyed this video, I would greatly appreciate if you would like and subscribe and give me your feedback. Thank you very much.